So first of all, thank you all for joining us today. I would like to introduce Tom Beatty to you. He owns Inspection Services of Wisconsin. He's completed over 2,500 inspections, has been in business since 2017. He's part of the leadership for WAHI Association chapter, though he's actually the vice president. And also prior to certifications in radon measurement through IEE or IEA. Uh, he's currently licensed for well inspections as well as water testing, septic evaluations, as well as home inspections, as you probably most know him as. And well, he does enjoy walking in the rain, but he does enjoy inspecting the rain as well. He is a Taurus. So there's a lowdown on Tom. Welcome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'll let you take the center stage here.
Hey, thanks much, Tom. Hey guys, I'm really happy to be here with you guys. I'm in the back corner of a local library out in Montello, so kind of stuffed into a corner here, but you've got me for as long as we need it, and I'm really excited to talk about inspections. It's my passion. It's what I've been doing for a really long time, and when Tom and I were talking about this forum and getting you guys together to answer some questions about just unpacking inspections and how they look right now. I told Tom there was a couple of things that I wanted to cover right off the bat to kind of get everybody's minds thinking about inspections and what's happening right now in our market. And the first thing that I think I want to address with everybody is just contingency timelines right now. If you're not having any issues getting your inspector in on a 7 or a 10-day contingency timeline, fantastic. That probably means that inspector is probably working with a smaller number of realtors, and that's why they're flexible and able to get in. But one of the things that in the Fox Valley market and the greater Fox Valley market as well that we've encountered from the inspection industry is we've actually lost about 25 inspectors in the last, well, since COVID started. And that's a significant number. We went from about 76, 78 inspectors in the Fox Valley down to the 50s, lower 50s. Thankfully, we've got some new inspectors that are coming on board, but a lot of those guys are part-time. They're still working full-time jobs. They're still starting to ramp up their business and trying to get started. So you've got essentially a supply issue right now with inspectors. And I guess what I'm driving at here is when you're looking at contingencies and timelines, you might, if you're looking at getting a particular inspector in or somebody who's been in the industry for a little while, at least a 14 to 21 day window now, where we used to be able to get in the 10 to 14 day. I can tell you right now, I'm booked out until August 14th for my inspections. So definitely one thing to be cognizant of when you're doing offers, just to make sure that you got the proper contingency. And always a great idea, and I have a number of realtors that do this. If you've got an inspector that you work with, shoot them a text if you're writing an offer and you want to know where they're at in their calendar. Some of us use online scheduling as well too. Jump online before you write that offer and just take a look at it and say, hey, you know what? It looks like they're out X amount of days. We should be safe to be able to do, whatever for a contingency. So that's my first suggestion for you. The other thing that I have written down that I think would be really good is attend inspections. I know that it's been a number of years since we saw inspections actively included in offers. I know there's still some markets where we're seeing um, inspection contingencies still not as common as other markets in the Fox Valley. Well, there's two parts to this component. The first one is that if you're there and you can listen to what we're telling our clients as we walk through the inspection, you're going to eliminate that game of telephone that occurs. And oftentimes that game of telephone that occurs, 24 hours even after the inspection, inevitably includes Uncle Joe who wired his own house 40 years ago, or whatever the case might be. So if you can be there at least for the recap or at some portion of the inspection, um, I think it helps a ton. The other part of that too is you're actually taking and helping us as inspectors by being there. If the inspector has got clients there while they're still inspecting, we've only got two sets of eyes, and those have to be focused on what we're doing for the client and for that house. We can't be watching what's going on. We can't be watching, who's in what room or what could get broke or whatever the case might be. And it happens. It certainly has happened for me where we've had to reach out to a seller and say, hey, XYZ fell off the mantle, or this fell off the wall. But we want to try to mitigate that as best as we possibly can. And if you can be there with your clients, I know you're not required to be there, but ethically that states that you should be there. If you can be there, it's a huge help for the entire process. It does bring up another part of this component as well too. And I will be honest, when I bring this up, a lot of times I get folks that say, "You're nuts, Tom. This doesn't happen in my market. It happens in your market." I'm just telling you right now. I was in the east side of Winnebago, Hilbert, last week Friday on a $1.5 million house, and there's a loaded shotgun behind the door. Safety, guys. If you're the seller's agent, talk to your sellers about safety. They've got people coming through the house that they don't know. Oftentimes they're bringing kids. If they've got anything in the house that should be locked and secured, please make sure that you remind them before their inspection, before their appraisal. If you've got a client coming with contractors at a random time, remind that seller that any of those items, whether it's drug paraphernalia, narcotics, weapons, whatever the case may be, get them locked and secured. And I've got a handful of stories I'm happy to share with you. I don't think we want to go there right now, but if you can reiterate with your sellers, um, that'd be really helpful. And I think as a buyer's agent, if you can let your buyers know that your inspection, yes, it's a time to come in and see the house again, but I would question whether it's the best time to have multiple contractors through, have grandma and grandpa with. I would say maybe it's not the best time to have multiple parties on site for that inspection. We're trying to really focus on having an honest conversation about the house, trying to educate at the same time, and that's really difficult when we've got multiple parties running around the house at the same time. So, that would be my other thought when we talk about just having everybody on site. And I just saw a comment about securing prescriptions. 100%. You're absolutely right. That's a huge one. Um, and the other comment, and then I paused a little bit here because I want to frame this the right way. The offer to purchase talks about reasonable access in a house. And in different parts of the state, we define reasonable access differently. So RA&W, when I talk with Paula, she's been awesome and has said, well, it's everything. It's, is the attic access open? Can you get in during the contingency window? Is the seller allowing you access to it? Is there a pathway to get to the electrical panel? She kind of said that it's the seller's responsibility, not yours as an agent, but the seller's responsibility, to make sure that there's reasonable access to things. If you scoot a little bit towards central Wisconsin, they're going to be pretty upfront and just say for central chapter, hey, guess what? It's just you got in when you needed to get in for the contingency. And I would just say if you're working with a seller, or if you've got a buyer that you're working with, yeah, it's not a bad idea to say, hey, is the attic access accessible? Can the inspector get in there? People are moving. I get it. There's parts of foundations and parts of garages we're not going to be able to see because of boxes. But maybe it's worthwhile asking the question, hey, can the inspector see around some of this stuff? Can they access all this stuff? And what it does is, oftentimes when we're on site doing recaps or doing the inspection, and we tell a client, I'm sorry, I can't get into that attic space, because of XYZ, their initial reaction is, well, I paid for you to go up there. How come you're not going up there? Or I'm concerned about roof leaks. How come you can't get up there and look? And then the question comes, can you get back here to take a look at it? And if we go back to my first point, most of us as inspectors, we're stacking up inspections like cordwood. We're trying to get 2 in a day, sometimes 3, and if we got to do a return trip, it's really difficult to squeeze that in with family life as well too. So, um, just food for thought on that one, as far as reasonable access is concerned. And then the last thing that I wanted to throw out to the group here, and this one has been something that's been for an inspector standpoint, a hot topic for a while, and we're starting to sort through it and figure out how to manage it. But there's a difference between what inspectors are required to inspect when it comes to a condo compared to what's allowed to be negotiated in the offer to purchase on that condo specific offer to purchase. And I guess I'll just describe it this way. On that offer to purchase for a condo, and I'm not gonna get the words perfect, but it states that um anything that's owned by the association or considered general property, hallways, maybe it's the roof, the siding, whatever the case might be, is non-negotiable, essentially in that offer to purchase, right? From a home inspector standpoint, our standards state that if we go to a dwelling that has less than four, go to a structure that has less than four dwellings in it, we have to look at everything as if it's a residential inspection. So that means technically our standards say we need to look at the roof, we need to look at the siding, we need to go through all this kind of stuff, whether it's considered an association owned repair or not. And so there's a bit of a conflict there between our standards and what your offer to purchase says. So my advice to you when it comes to that is you got to make sure your buyer know, and this is challenging because every condo document is 185 pages, and I get that. But you've got to make sure that your buyer knows what's included in the association costs and their repair items versus what they're responsible for. And most condos are drywall to drywall is what the client's responsible for, but we're seeing changes to that all over the place. And there are associations out there that they pay in just for landscaping and snow removal, and they're responsible for everything else. So um, as inspectors, at least as WAHI inspectors, we've been educated to uh, to ask the client if we're doing a condo inspection, what is your responsibility and what's the association's responsibility, and where are your concerns? Should I be inspecting this or should I not be inspecting this? And if your client can answer those questions, it makes the whole process smoother. If we can't get an answer from the client, we're probably going to come back to you and say, hey, what can you tell us? Because we have to amend our contract to show what we're going to inspect, what we're not going to inspect, so that we're doing the best possible job for your client. So just keep that in the back of your mind with condos. When you get that, make sure you're reaching out to your inspector. Let them know it's a condo. If you know right off the bat, hey, it's just drywall to drywall, let them know. If there's something unique, hey, they're responsible for that screen porch because they added it. Great, let them know. Um, but that would be it's the lines of communication that are incredibly important. Um, we can touch on a few other things. I guess I'll pause there. Those are kind of my top five things that I wanted to bring up to you guys to kind of get the conversation going. But are there any questions, Tom, or anybody else that you were seeing in the chat that you want me to address right off the bat?
Nothing I see in the chat, but if anybody has a question, come off mute or feel free to raise your hand.
I just saw one that came through. It says, "Can you update us on electrical box?"
Hmm.
I guess, Jim, if you're able to, can you give me a little bit more description on what you want, or maybe what the question, frame it for me a little bit, so I have a better idea on what you're looking for. I think one of the things that we're seeing now that inspections are coming back, and they're still only on about 30 to 40% of listings, or transactions, I should say, but our standards as inspectors changed in 2021. We're required to have a different style report and all that kind of stuff, but our definition changed as well too. And I suspect that might be part of Kim's question is, what are we looking at for electrical boxes, and how does that look? We have to report on the amperage, we have to report on the voltage, we need to report on what the service entry is, and we also need to talk a little bit about that install of that panel. Is it grounded to a grounding electrode system? Is there double taps? Is there a particular panel? We've all heard about the Federal Pacific stab lock panels, I'm sure, at this point in time, and how those are issues. But that's all the stuff that we need to report on. Are pushmatics still an issue? And are there any other circuit boxes? Oh, yeah. Kim, that's a great question. Pushmatics are an antiquated box. I will tell you that in the 70s, those were top of the line. And those pushmatic panels were phenomenal. The only challenge with them right now is it's tough to find the breakers, and it's most electricians when they look at it are going to say, let's just upgrade this to a newer style panel. By definition, as a defect, is it a safety hazard, health hazard, or if not repaired, replaced, or removed? Would it impact another component? That's our definition, and you'd have to find something in that panel that met that to be a defect. So if there was arcing, if there was melted wires, um, double tapping, improperly sized wires, those things would elevate it to a level of a defect. Um, but I wouldn't say that they're a major issue right now. The Federal Pacific stab lock panels are really the ones that you're going to find that most folks have concerns with. Oh, and then it looks like we got a question here from Art Lapro Art. I will tell you, if you're looking to get into home inspections, this forum right now is probably not the best one, but what you want to do is, and this is great information for everybody else too. The Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors, or WAHI, as Tom alluded to at the onset, is our version of WRA. And WAHI does offer training or a pre-licensing class in the state of Wisconsin. You're required to have a certain number of hours to sit for the national exam and the state exams to become a home inspector. And the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors does offer a class. I'm one of the trainers that goes through and helps with that education. But you can go to wahigroup.com and there's more information there, Art, that you can glean about the next class, which I believe is in October, where it's located. It's a week long, costs, all that kind of stuff. But would encourage you to look. Like I said, we need more good quality inspectors in the Fox Valley. Good questions. Anybody else out there? Well, let me talk a little bit. I'm sure as realtors, one of the biggest challenges you guys have is variations in inspectors and what they're inspecting. And it's probably one of the biggest challenges. And full disclosure, I understand in the process and the transaction, it's us and appraisers, right? Those are the biggest challenges and hurdles you guys have to overcome. Um, can't talk to appraisers. I don't hold that license. But as far as inspectors, there's a couple of challenges that you're going to have. First, there are multiple associations that an inspector can be a part of. There's ASHI, there's INTERNACHI, there's WAHI, and there's another one called AAAMI. So there's 4 different associations. 3 of those are national associations. So they're looking at, and we're going to deep dive a little bit, but this is why we call it Inspections Unpacked. Those national associations like ASHI, INTERNACHI, and AAAHI, they're looking at what's called the International Building Code, the IBC, and at some level, the UDC, Uniform Dwelling Code. Now, Wisconsin is very different than many of our local Midwest partners. Each county has the ability to look at the UDC, the Uniform Dwelling Code, and each municipality for that matter, and adjust as they see fit. So in other states that surround us, you have to adopt the verbiage word for word from the IBC or the UDC. In Wisconsin, the counties and municipalities have the freedom to adjust as they see fit. The other thing that's a challenge is Wisconsin tends to lag behind. So, for instance, right now for electrical code, we're on NEC 2017, and there's a small chapter in the state code called SPS 316. Most of our states that surround us right now are on NEC 2019 or even 2021. So we're lagging behind. So this is all important, and it builds into this conversation that if you're using an inspector who's perhaps not a WAHI member or doesn't inspect to WAHI standards, that means that they're inspecting to International Building Code or UDC standards through an ASHI, an INTERNACHI, or a AAAHI association standards. Whereas WAHI standards there's a bit of a plug for the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors, but we're using current professionals, so current licensed plumbers, current licensed electricians in our local markets to educate us on what we should be calling out, what we should be looking for, um, and really truly what would be considered defects versus repair items and all that kind of stuff. And so if you've got some variation in inspectors and what's being called out, that could be one of the reasons. Um, the other reason is education. We are required, just like you guys are now that you hold a license through DSPS to do a certain number of CEUs, each year. And I will tell you guys, of the, like I mentioned before, roughly 50 inspectors in the Fox Valley that are members of the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors. I see actively 20 to 25 of those attending our monthly meetings, even fewer attending our seminar classes that happen twice a year for our CEUs. A lot of folks are going online to get CEUs. That's certainly okay and acceptable. But as far as in person from the local pros, there's not as many people putting the effort into that work as there are total inspectors. So when you're doing your lists and trying to figure out who you want to work with and who might be a good inspector in your area, certainly asking if they're a WAHI inspector and asking what their education background is are two great questions to start with to figure out if that's a good quality inspector for your list. Yeah, just reading your question right now, Kim. Are insurance companies reaching out to home inspectors asking questions about defects called out or for the age of major components? Wow. Talk about a major change in our industry the last 2 years, right? First and foremost, I'm just curious, and I don't know how the best way is to respond to this, but I've got a couple of agents that I work with that will tell their clients, they'll manage expectations before we even start the inspection. And they'll say, guys, this report is for you. If a lender or if insurance company is asking for it, and Tom, you can, talk to me after the call and put me in a corner if I say this wrong, but um, they'll say, try not to share the whole report. Try just to share a section or something like that. Because I think sometimes we can get mired in these five categories and what's set up. We we as inspectors, I can tell you from my personal experience and from the 8 to 10 guys I talk to on a regular basis, absolutely, we're getting called out by lenders and insurance companies to do roof evaluations. We're getting called out for foundation evaluations. They're putting some specific, and a lot of this comes from underwriters, I think. But they're putting specific language in now that a licensed foundation professional needs to go out and look at. Well, guess what? State of Wisconsin doesn't have a licensed foundation professional. And so the challenge becomes, who gets to go out and take a look at things. But absolutely, we're getting asked to go out and reevaluate not only after the inspection, but a lot of times after the appraisal goes through as well. And there's been some challenges. I think early on, a lot of us were willing to do that. But the challenge that we're learning now, particularly with roofs and foundations, is we're seeing some companies and some appraisers and some lenders asking for guarantees that a roof will last X amount of years or that a foundation won't leak. And in our state standards, it clearly states we're not required to give an age of a system, or we're not required to guarantee that something is going to last a particular lifespan. So there certainly has been more of that going around, Kim. Great questions. This one's for you, Tom.
Great question. I think lighting by design, perhaps on Lindale, but I didn't pick it out, so I can't take the credit for it. And personally, I'd prefer not to have a copy of the home inspection unless I really need to for some reason. So yeah, that's my take on it. And the big thing too, coming up for us of late is that roof situation where I have a client that's getting wild quotes anywhere from like 1,300 to over 2 grand on a $170,000 property. because the agents checked the roof for agents and they had no idea what the age of the roof is. So they're just using an almost worst case scenario for that. So yeah, I guess whether we're a buyer's agent or listing agent, if we could get that data up front on future deals, that'd be awesome because insurance companies are going to ask for it, then it's going to trickle downhill to me, then I'll be reaching back out to you. So the more we can ask certain questions up front will make it a lot easier and create less conversations later. Not that we don't want to talk to, but um, you probably don't want to chase down the age of roof when we're into a transaction trying to get insurance. So any way we could do that during the process would be absolutely wonderful. Um,
Yeah, Jim just asked a question in the chat. What do you see the biggest concern with home inspections in the future? That's a great question. We I was reached out to by WRA to see if we couldn't do a little bit of a conversation about AI in ChatGPT and how it's going to impact our industry. I will tell you guys, I think that's one of the things that's on the forefront that's going to be a challenge. And it goes back to a little bit about our discussion before on the state standards for our licensees in the state. But what's happening right now is most inspectors are going to use some type of software program that is robust, offers a ton of different resources, can send emails, can do all that kind of stuff, and part of that is you can include videos and photos. And some of these software programs are starting to utilize AI so that when we as an inspector take a picture of something, it automatically throws in a comment for us. Two things that are really great there. One, it makes it easier for me as an inspector, right? I have to do less when I'm on site, and hopefully can turn the reports quicker. The other challenge with that, though, is as we went back to our conversation before, the state of Wisconsin lags a little bit on what UDC and SPS codes we follow. And to that point, AI and ChatGPT, if you know much about it, it's pulling national information into a pool and trying to pick out the most common and most reputable resources to provide us with comments when we do it. It's a Web 2.0 feature, much like Wikipedia was. I mean, this is essentially AI is essentially the grandson of Wikipedia, essentially. But the challenge that we're going to have in Wisconsin in particular is that since we lag behind, those AI generated comments are not going to be accurate for our SPS, our codes, and our inspections. And so, I think that's one of the concerns I have. ChatGPT being another one. I think it's really robust. I think it's cool how you can do all these different things and it's fun. Um, but you need to also be able to have an inspector who can use a little common sense. We talk a lot about, yes, you've got a symptom here, right? If you have moisture intrusion, let's say you've got wood rot inside the house or damage on some drywall, the stuff inside the house is a symptom, right? And if you're using AI or ChatGPT, it might raise it to a defect concern right off the bat. But we want to talk about, well, what's causing it? Let's stop the issue before we have to address the symptoms of the concerns. And so usually that's a flashing or something from the outside of the house that's not functioning the way it should or installed the way it should be. And when you're using AI or ChatGPT, you remove that common sense, and it's now just going to look at individual components and identify what's an issue versus what's a defect versus a further evaluate. I think that could be a challenge as well too. So, AI is up there for me. I think it's got some good things that we can implement and use, but it's gonna be challenging, I think, to make that work for Wisconsin. The other biggest concern I have with future home inspections would just be getting the right amount of inspectors in our industry. Like I said, we lost 25 over the last 5 years or so. We do have 3 or 4 young people that are coming in, but in my role within the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors in the Fox Valley, I oftentimes get realtors that reach out to me and say, "Hey, is this report compliant? Is it not compliant? Does it have the categories that we need on the summary page? Does it not?" Um, and I do see a number of reports that are not compliant still from inspectors. And oftentimes it's because, either they weren't educated or they went through a different training program that didn't have the information that they needed for our state. And I see that still as a concern, is getting good quality folks in the Fox Valley who are doing good inspections and compliant with reports. And I think that's potentially a challenge for us. So it's really twofold. What other questions do you guys have for inspections?
Well, we're in for a few additional questions here. Question for you, Tom. So
Yeah.
obviously you do home inspections. However, I believe you do well and septic inspections too. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. Um, so in the state of Wisconsin, on your addendums, there's certain licenses that can go through and do well and septic inspections. So I currently hold a pump installer's license, which allows me to do the well inspection and the water testing as well, for any type of rural properties that have a well. And then I'm also licensed as a what's called a POUTS inspector, which is one of the licenses that the WRA recognizes that can do septic evaluations. So um, been doing that now since end of last year, 20 October of last year is when I got all those licensed and set up. Um, they're fun, they're great. They take hour and a half to 2 hours. And I think for those rural properties, it's as important, if not maybe a little bit more important, when we talk about, what components could impact the value of a house. Those are two huge components or systems right there, that if there are issues, um, could be a challenge. And the thing with septic and well inspections, I think, are the same as a home inspection. It's all about education, and it's all about who does the right inspections when they go through it. And we've got a couple of really good guys in the valley that are doing them. Some really well-known guys who are doing really well. Um, and then just like any other industry, we got some folks who probably aren't doing the best job they possibly could. But I can expand on those more if guys have questions on those, or ladies have questions on those. We can certainly talk more about those. Um, I just saw another question that came through. What about inspections on drain lines? They seem to be common in other areas, but not so much in Oshkosh area. Yeah, I think Kim, what you're talking about there is on a city application, your main sanitary that goes from the house out to what's below the road in the city that the municipality manages. Um, there is, to my knowledge, there's only one company in the Fox Valley that offers what's called televising your main sanitary line or inspecting that main sanitary line. There's only one company that does it because I think frankly, it's just not a lot of guys want to do it. There was a perception, I think a couple of years ago, that it was outside the realm of our inspections. But we've been able to retool on that with the new standards, and we've learned that it is not considered a test because it is still a visual inspection. Um, but I think there's enough guys out there who don't want to try to open up the plumbing cleanouts, don't want to have to try to go through some of the additional training that it just hasn't been done. But I think it's something that more guys will add to. It's an added service. I think a lot of guys treat it that way. Where if you want them to televise the sewer line, it's an extra fee. But as far as the Fox Valley area, there's only one company that I know of that does those on a regular basis.
In addition to the home inspection, do you also test for radon if it's part of the offer?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation too, Tommy. I certainly do it. Up until this year, I was certified through the Indoor Environmental Association for radon testing. There's a couple other certifications that guys can hold as well too. It's important to note that in the state of Wisconsin, we are the only state in the Midwest, at least the states adjacent to us, that doesn't have a certification requirement for the measurement professional and does not have a certification requirement for the installation professional. So it's a bit of the Wild West. The good news for you is that I think most of the folks that are out there are trying to do good work, but there's some nuances when you measure for radon that are very important. The closed house conditions, the location of where you place the unit, not only what room, but also how far from exterior walls, HVAC vents, flooring, ceiling, all that kind of stuff that come into play. Um, if you want to know, I was actually last week I was on site where a radon unit was placed directly on the furnace. And if there's one spot that's probably a top 5 on a no, that you should not place it here, it would be that spot. The other one would be right on top of a washer dryer. Another great spot to not place them. Um, but it's all about education, right? It goes back to is your inspector or radon professional in this case um, doing what they need to do? And there's Kim just asked a question of the requirements for testing monitors and calibrations, and yeah, that's all part of this conversation. There are requirements depending on the unit. Again, Wisconsin doesn't hold these requirements, so it is the Wild West. But if you're a professional who's gone through certification, you're required to have your monitors calibrated every year. You're required to be able to produce that calibration to prove that it's done. Um, and you're required to do self-tests throughout the year, every dozen inspections, to verify that your units are still reading the way they should, or if they've been dropped or somehow damaged, you have to go and get them recertified or recalibrated. And so there's a ton of things here that I would say one of the things that you could add to your arsenal as a realtor that would be really helpful for your buyers and sellers would be there is a guide, and it's on a website called lowradon.org. And Tom, if you want me to add that to the chat, I can, but um lowradon.org is the state of Wisconsin's website, housed through oh perfect, thanks, housed through Department of Health and Human Services, that has a buyer's and a seller's guide for radon. And so it talks about closed house conditions. It talks about the temperature within the house that has to be set at. It talks about what appliances you can run versus what you can't run during the testing period and all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for more information, you want to be able to become a little bit more literate on how to test for radon, I would say start with lowradon.org. And then you're more than welcome to reach out to me if you've got other questions on how to make sure that's done correctly.
I just went online and put it back in the chat here. So
No, that's great. Thank you for doing that. Means I don't have to, Tom. I appreciate that.
what other questions?
All right, then I've got a couple of quick things I think that might be really helpful as maybe it looks like we're wrapping up. I want to talk a little bit about conflict in inspections, right? We always have it. It's always going to be there. Hey, why did you call this out? Or contractor said this is a-okay, or I've got a, let's say you've had an inspector who something happened in the house and you've got an issue with it. Couple things for you right off the bat. If it's a conflict between a licensed pro, a contractor, a plumbing person, whatever the case might be, that says, hey, your inspector is wrong, take a step back from it. And the best way to describe this is just to say both parties can be right. And I know that doesn't make a ton of sense right now, but if you remember, our definition of defect as home inspectors is different than what your local licensed pro or contractor has in their license requirements. So they get to look at a house based on age. We as home inspectors, it's not written in our defect definition that we get to look at it based on age. And so that's a challenge. I completely understand. But there's that possibility where your home inspector might call out, and firewalls are great examples. In a pre-1980s house, you're going to see a lot of home inspectors calling out firewalls as missing or fire separation not being there on attic hatches and doors. Well, that code came into play in Wisconsin in the 80s. So you might get a contractor that says, well, this is the 1950s house with a garage that was built in the 60s, never required to have it. And that's, you know what? Both are true. And both individuals are right. And unfortunately, that's part of the process that you got to work through with your buyer and seller to figure out, is that a value component that becomes part of the defect for the buyer, and what is the seller willing to do? And I know that's not a ton of fun for me to say it that way, but that's the reality. And then the other thing I wanted to just kind of bring up too, if you've got a report that's not compliant or a concern with an inspector, your first step should always be to reach out to the inspector. The WRA has a great landing page and website all about inspections. If you've never looked at it, you just got to log in with your member number and just search for inspections, and they're going to pull it out. But some of their messaging and information on WRA just talks specifically to that point. Reach out to your inspector. It's their job to offer up, or it's their responsibility to listen, and if a mistake was made, make the report, amend it, whatever the case might be. That's why the reports are required to have the date that the report was changed on it, in addition to the date that the report was changed written, and just to have that dialogue and conversation. If for some reason it doesn't work out, and you don't feel like you've gotten an adequate resolution from that conversation, then you can talk to your broker and see the direction you want to go from there. But those are the two things I thought I'd bring up from conflict on the tail end of this conversation. But I've got another question here that came through the chat. What is the cost for a recall item? You coming back out to a property to confirm repair was done properly? Oh, yeah, great question. It varies a little bit by every inspector. Some inspectors don't charge. Some inspectors look at it and say, well, that time that I spend out there to look at that one component is a time that I can't make my normal wage from a normal home inspection. And so some inspectors say it's the cost of a normal home inspection. Some inspectors are going to say it's $100, $200, whatever the case might be. I don't get a lot of callbacks, to be honest with you. And so I don't know the last time I went back out to a house, to be honest with you, to do a follow-up visit. I suspect I'd probably be in that 200 to 250 range if you wanted me to go back out and look at something. But I always tell clients, when you're negotiating, was there written in the contract that a licensed so and so should do it, or repairs should be completed by a qualified whatever? And if they say yes, then usually my response is, hey, if you had it done by a licensed so and so or a qualified professional, there's really no reason for me to go out. They did it to the standards that are required by the state of Wisconsin. And usually that's true. I usually don't have too many issues with that. It's a great question though.
Going back to that previous conversation you're having about, the differential of, what your standards are versus other industry individuals, do you foresee that ever aligning where the standards will be similar to what you guys look at? Or do you feel like that there'll always be some differential there?
Yeah, if we had a crystal ball, that would be great, right? It's going to be a challenge. I don't think it's ever going to perfectly line up, and the reason for that is because those code standards, the SPS standards in the state of Wisconsin, are constantly evolving and changing every couple of years, depending on whether it's electrical or plumbing or HVAC or whatever the case might be. So, and unfortunately, our industry is relatively young. The inspection industry, as far as licensed inspectors, started in the late 90s, 99, 98. Um, and so we're pretty young, and even back then when we started out, it didn't align with what was there, and it didn't align very well with WRA and the offer to purchase either. So you've actually got three prongs there that you'd have to be able to braid together in order for it to work out really well. I will add, one of the things that the Fox Valley chapter has been, in the Fox Valley chapter of the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors, it's a mouthful, sorry. Um, one of the things that we've been doing over the last year and a half with the help of RA&W, and hopefully you've seen the emails, is we've been doing education houses. So we take a morning. The next one's going to be in September. We take a morning and we offer a walkthrough. It's free of cost. It doesn't cost realtors anything. But we have usually about 8 home inspectors on site at a house. And it's a rotational based training where we have a Q&A at the end as well too. So if you want to be able to go in and in a small group setting, ask some specific questions about home inspections, about what we look for, maybe glean some information that would help you when you do an inspection for any listings. Um, that way you can ask us specific questions, and like I said, it's one morning, a couple of hours. We feed you, and we want to be able to answer questions for you as well. Plus you get to meet, 8, sometimes we have a few extras kind of running around, 8 to 10 inspectors who are doing probably most of the business, to be honest with you, in the Fox Valley market. Um, and ask them specific questions, that kind of stuff. We've had a lot of really great feedback. We've done it 3 times now. And would encourage you guys to think about that. I will tell you that RA&W sends out the invites for that, and it usually fills up in about a day. Um, and then the other thing too that we've done within the Fox Valley chapter of the of Wahi is, if you've got a larger brokerage firm that wants to do that same thing, wants to have an education house just for your realtors, that's something that we can certainly do from our chapter. Again, we'll pull together 8 inspectors. We'll do a rotation-based training for you at a house if you guys can identify the house for us. And we'll help educate you on what we're doing, what we're looking for, how we communicate to buyers, and how that might vary a little bit between inspectors. And it's a ton of fun. It doesn't sound like a ton of fun because it's an inspection, but we make it fun somehow. And we get a lot of good feedback from folks as well.
Has a time, date, and location been established for that one?
For the September one, no. Unfortunately
Okay.
not. We were looking at trying to set it up for after orientation, the September orientation for realtors. We just haven't set a specific time and date yet. And I think we're looking at for September doing a morning session and an afternoon session just because of interest in the past.
And if someone has additional questions regarding home inspections, is there any resources other than the couple we mentioned already that they should be aware of?
Yeah, actually, I failed to bring this up, Tom. Thank you for the little nudge there. So the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors has a couple of Facebook pages, and one of those is a public page that is monitored by anybody who's a Fox Valley chapter member um, of WAHI. And so if you go to Facebook and you type in Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors Fox Valley, it should pull you to a group that you can join. You can be a realtor, you can be an individual, you can be whomever, and you can ask a home inspector. And it sometimes it takes a little bit to get responses. Sometimes it happens immediately. It just depends on whether or not somebody's looking at the page and at the queue at that moment. Um, but uh, but that's one great one right off the bat that we try to be at your tips. Otherwise, I mentioned it before. If you've got a trusted home inspector that you like to use, or hopefully you've got 2 or 3 that you feel comfortable with, it never hurts to have a group chat. And we do this as inspectors. That's a little unknown secret, right? So we've got text groups and text strings all put together that, when we're on site, if something doesn't make sense or if something happens, we can send a text to our entire group of other inspectors and work together on stuff. So a couple of different ways that you can do that if you've got questions, but please reach out. Don't be shy. We want to be resources in the transaction, even though I know sometimes we're an obstacle as well.
Cool. Is that Ask a Wahi Home Inspector?
That's it. Yep.
Okay, I just put that in the chat.
Awesome.
All right, so one other quick question here for you, Tom. What's your typical territory you cover for home inspections?
Yeah. So I'm based out of Princeton. I'll drive an hour and a half out of Princeton, and so that'll put me at the south side of Wausau, south side of Green Bay. Um, Occasionally I get over on the east side of Winnebago, and then Lomira, Beaver Dam, Waupun, north side of Madison, and then over to the Dells. That's generally speaking kind of the typical area I'll cover.
Yeah, perfect. And
Yeah,
do you have a Facebook page at all for your business?
I do inspection services of Wisconsin. I'm on Facebook, my website as well. Um, Sheboygan
Okay.
area, I don't get over there often. If I get a call for Sheboygan area, there's two or three really good inspectors in the neck of the woods that I usually refer out to. And that's one of the benefits of being part of Wahi is I've got 5 to 8 inspectors that I know across the state that if I can't get to something or if it's too far, I know I can get you into the hands of somebody who's a good quality inspector that would treat you and your clients well. Great
And
questions, guys.
what is the range like cost wise for a home inspection? Just for the regular home inspection, but then also if they wanted, well and septic, testing, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will tell you guys, if it's been a while since you've had an inspection, then you should know costs have gone up for inspections. Fox Valley, historically, prior to COVID, we were probably the cheapest in the state for home inspections. I will right now. I know that there are some inspectors in the area that are charging right around 350, 325 for an inspection. Um, there are also inspectors that don't leave the door for less than five right now in the Fox Valley. Um, and then it usually increases based on square footage and systems installed. Some inspectors charge extra for age of house. Some inspectors charge for mileage. Um, I know there's a couple inspectors out there that charge extra if it's a detached garage versus an attached garage. So we all have our metrics, right? We're not unionized, so that means that we can all charge individually on how we see fit. But generally speaking, on your house that's under 200,000 square feet, you should anticipate that your buyers are probably looking at something in the neighborhood of 550 to 375, depending on what inspector they choose. And that's just for the home inspection. Commercial inspections, man, commercial inspections are it's a whole other beast because there's no regulation for commercial inspections, and depending on the size of the property, some inspectors are charging per square foot. Some are looking at a different. Some inspectors will actually pull in licensed HVAC and licensed plumbers and licensed electricians to help them out. So costs on commercial inspections vary widely. For well water and septic, generally speaking, you're in that neighborhood of 400 to 500 for well water and septic inspections, and more than likely closer to that 450, 500 range, to be honest with you. Um, and then for radon, most guys, if you're asking for a radon test as part of the home inspection, you're going to see a cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 for that radon test. There's a few companies out there that will not charge for the measurement, and what they tell you is if a system is needed, that cost for the measurements included in the install. Um, just food for thought on that one for you. You know, if you look at the regulating, and again, Wisconsin's not regulated for radon. But if you look at the certifying companies, they actually require that the measurement be done by a separate company than the installation. And then that the follow-up measurement be done by a different company than the installation company, just because they want to mitigate any concerns for conflict of interest there. So, um, yeah, food for thought. Like I said, Wisconsin's not regulated. You can manage that for your clients however you want.
I'm guessing there's usually if those free services, there's probably a high percentage of fails. So,
Yeah, that's what we
so
see,
the
generally
installation.
speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Real quick sidebar note, I put a feedback link in if you guys could take a couple minutes. It's really short, just a couple questions to fill that out. We have a couple giveaways for that, but we appreciate your feedback, on any takeaways you had from Tom, but also any future topics you'd like to see. So if you could take that time and fill that out, we'd certainly appreciate that. All right, we're almost to the top of the hour here. So any last minute questions that anybody has, we can um, answer here for you guys.
Oh, thanks, Neil. Appreciate that.
If not, if we can all thank Tom for joining us, we appreciate his time. We know he's got a crazy hectic schedule, obviously with work, but with family activities too. So we certainly appreciate you carving out an hour of your time here today.
No, thanks for thinking of it, Tom. And if there's any questions that have follow for anybody that has follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. All my contact information is on my website. Otherwise, even if it's a simple text, my number is 920-284-4806. Just let me know who you are when you send the text over, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. One last question. Do you consult an out-of-state people needing an inspection for a property after or on another inspector? Oh, uh, I try to stay out of litigation. And I will tell you, just to clarify on your question, Art, if it's a property that's out of state, I'm only licensed for Wisconsin for inspections. But if you mean somebody who's coming from a different state for a property that's in Wisconsin, there's a couple people who do litigation work. And believe it or not, it's our current president for Wahi and our former president for Wahi are probably the two in the state that I know of that would be great resources. So if that's something you have a follow-up question on, feel free to text me or give me a call afterwards, and I can get you the contact for those folks.
Awesome. And I also have I'll be sending out an email, recap email to everybody. So feel free to that. And I put Tom's Facebook page as well as website in the chat. So I'll leave that up here for a little bit. So in case anybody wants to grab that information.
You guys are great. I appreciate everything you guys do for realtors, all the work that you guys are doing on listings. I know it's incredibly competitive market in a lot of areas. Um, and I know inspections aren't always necessarily an option when you're negotiating. So thank you for the ones that do make it through. And overall, I'll tell you, we just want to be a resource in the transaction and the process. So use us as such, and we'd be happy to help you out however we can.
Awesome. Thanks again, Tom. Appreciate your time and thank you everybody for attending.